okay. Slightly scarily, I can't see myself at the moment because we're still sharing some slides. But what I'd like to do is obviously say hello to everyone. Good evening to everyone. Welcome to Stowe Talks. Now, tonight's going to be a really interesting session. I've been looking forward to it for a long while now. Tonight we're going to be doing, well, the topic, I suppose, the title is Understanding Economic Abuse and How to Deal with It. As before, there might be a bit of a windy road, so to speak. We might go slightly off-piste on the subject, and we hope to cover all the questions that people have. And we're happy to go wherever those questions take us after we've done Rosie's presentation. Now, I suspect, especially because of Rosie's high profile, we may have many new listeners with us tonight. So there's a massive welcome from us here at Stowe Family Law to the newbies. You might not know much about us. We are the largest family law firm in England and Wales. We've now got nearly 60 offices. We have been around for a while. And the purpose of these webinars is to share the knowledge that we've got, but also share the experts that we've come to know over the years with people on a wider scale. We like to do more than just provide a blog and post it on the internet. And this is our way of giving a bit more back if we can. This year, we've covered a variety of different subjects. We've covered surrogacy, we've covered narcissism, supporting children through divorce. We've done ADHD in relationships, male survivors of domestic abuse. It's a pretty broad catalogue of subjects that we've covered so far. Now we are, I suppose our content is driven by yourselves. We do try to cater for what everybody wants to listen to or know more about, or be introduced to certain experts, things like that. Tonight is the last one this year. And I have to say that myself and the team are a little bit grayer. We've got a few more wrinkles this year, and we've shed a few tears along the way. We're very grateful to our guests and how authentic they've been with us on here. It is very much a safe space, and we've developed quite a loyal following, which is really wonderful for us. We do really enjoy doing this, and we'd like to carry on. So please let us know what you want to hear about for next year. We've got a few interesting topics in the pipeline already, and I'll talk to you about those a little bit later. But I'd like to say, as it's the end of the year, a big thank you to the team who make all the arrangements, who organise this, who organise me, and just make Stowe Talks a really lovely thing to work on. I'm feeling clearly very Christmassy and very bubbly at the moment because I'm really pleased that Rosie's with us tonight. Tonight's guest is Rosie Lyon. Now, as I say, a few of you might know her anyway because she has got such a high profile, especially in social media. And she's very good at publicising what she does. The campaigning that she does is not done at half measure, and quite rightly so. Now, Rosie's going to talk to you tonight about her story and also about economic abuse. What we're going to cover is quite a broad spectrum, I think. And after the presentation, what we'll do is obviously questions, as we've done before. It's a difficult topic tonight. Now, if you've registered for this webinar, you probably have an interest in the subject of domestic abuse, whether it's as a victim or a survivor. You may be related to a victim. You may be a counsellor, you might be a lawyer, crikey, you might be a law student. We welcome you in whatever capacity you are here with us tonight. It's a difficult topic for us lawyers, as we'll touch on later on. This is a situation sometimes where the law does fall short in terms of helping victims. Things aren't always clear cut, and things don't work in the way that we feel that they should. As I say, it's a massive topic. It may open doors to to some spin-off topics, or we need to clarify or drill down on some parts of it, that's not a problem. Let us know what you think. Now, tonight, from a housekeeping perspective, you already know from the nice Zoom warning that we've got that we are recording tonight's session. Please use the Q&A function for the questions. This is a safe space, obviously. We've got the chat function on as well, so please feel free to put down comments, put down your own experience. We'll look out for the questions and we'll deal with them as best we can at the end. As I say, please give us feedback as well. These webinars are driven by you. And now I think probably best to introduce Rosie, and she can share some of her huge knowledge with us. Hi, Rosie.
Hello, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. It's lovely to see you. Are you happy to dive straight in?
Yeah, I'm happy to dive straight in, not a problem.
Cool. I'll hand over to you then.
Perfect, thank you. Hello everybody, and thank you for being here today. Just a little bit about me to start with. So my name's Rosie Lyon. I'm 28 years old. I currently work in the banking sector. So currently I'm an executive assistant to two heads of the bank. I also work very closely with our HR department, as well as our vulnerability specialists for our customers, looking at raising awareness, implementing training and enhancing policies and procedures for people that go through domestic abuse. I'm a qualified financial abuse specialist. On top of that, I also volunteer for 15 different organisations and charities, whether that's sharing my story or bringing impactful change that we need in regards to domestic abuse. And I'm also a qualified breakup and divorce coach. I specialise in domestic abuse and financial abuse. So today I'm here to talk about economic abuse, understanding it and how to deal with it. It's a topic very close to my heart, and I'll explain that as I go through. So just to start it off about economic abuse and what it is. So economic abuse is legally recognised as domestic abuse. So domestic abuse is obviously the main top tier of it, and then we have the subcategories that come underneath that, and economic abuse is one of them. So economic abuse, it often occurs in the context of intimate partner violence and involves controlling of a partner or an ex-partner's money and finances, as well as things that money can't buy. So on the screen there, you'll see it is a definition from Surviving Economic Abuse. They are a charity that solely speaks on economic abuse. They're one of the only charities that do so, one of my favourite charities at that. So, you know, the economic abuse is very wide, so many different, you know, elements to economic abuse, and it can happen to so many different people. And there's so many different impacts of that as well. So I've wrote some down here. So obviously it occurs alongside another form of abuse. So when we talk about domestic abuse, which people go through, domestic abuse, as I said, is at the top, and you have the subcategories. And that's because normally when you go through one sort of term of abuse, you normally go through others as well at the same time, and economic abuse is seen as that. So for instance, someone could go through physical abuse as well as economic abuse, sexual, psychological, financial, harassment, online, lots of different types of abuses. It's designed to create economic instability or make someone economically dependent. So obviously what we mean by that is that, you know, they don't have the control of their own finances, or, you know, that they have to rely on somebody else and be dependent on that individual rather than being able to freely live their own life. And that goes nicely into the next point of limits freedom. So, of course, as you can imagine, you know, people have bank accounts. If you didn't have access to that bank account, for instance, or someone was controlling the way that you spent your money, you know, you'd feel quite isolated and be very limited to what you can do. Difficult to leave an abuser. So, of course, with economic abuse, they mainly have control of your finances and other different elements of that. And that could mean that people do generally sometimes stay with abusers, perpetrators, because they have no finances, or, you know, they rely on that individual, you know, and it happens quite often. they do say in domestic abuse cases it takes someone on average 7 times to leave an abuser, and obviously that's just an average. It's completely different because you know, even though domestic and economic abuse, like, it happens to so many individuals, we all have similar stories, but it doesn't mean that we're all the same. And then struggles to rebuild lives. So this one's something I'm extremely passionate about, and something, you know, that I advocate for, which I'll get into shortly. But you know, struggle to rebuild lives. You know, you've had the economic abuse, people have taken away your finances, and you have to start rebuilding. You know, and I'll get through to some examples in a minute, but one of the main things that happens with economic abuse is when they, you know, take the control, they take debt out in people's names, and then it causes us to have poor credit scoring. Building up a credit scoring does take a long period of time, if not decades, and without a credit scoring, you're not able to rebuild financially, which I will go into. So there's economic abuse and financial abuse. They come together, but quite a lot of people get confused with the difference between them, because economic and financial very similar. So the difference is that financial abuse is a subcategory of economic abuse. So you have domestic abuse, then under that would be economic abuse, and under that would be financial abuse. And the difference being is just that economic abuse is a lot broader, with a lot more examples than what financial abuse is. So financial abuse includes controlling finances, stealing money, coercing someone into debt, whereas economic abuse is all of that plus controlling other resources. Now, identifying economic abuse can be very difficult. You know, I found that very difficult, which I'll go into, but there's lots of different ways that someone can be economically abused. So I've put some examples down here, examples that, again, I've taken from personal experience, as well as from Surviving Economic Abuse charity, who I do highly recommend. So sabotaging income and access to money. They can stop you from being in education or employment, take salary, take the children's savings or money, and refuse to allow access to bank accounts. So that's one of the differences between economic and financial abuse, would be stopping them being in education or employment. And that's how, you know, economic abuse is a lot broader there. Restricting how to use your money, so they can control on how your money's spent. So for example, if someone wanted to buy something, the perpetrator, abuser may say that they're not allowed to, even though it's with their own money. Make you ask for money again, so taking over bank accounts. So you have the lack of control there, where you have to ask for an allowance to even go and get food shopping. Checks receipts or justify spending. So for instance, there is examples where people have been given sort of what the abuser would say is pocket money, and then they have to give over the receipt to make sure that they haven't taken any of the change. Control the use of mobile phones. So that's the main one, and that also would go into a subcategory of, like, you know, online abuse as well, and technology abuse. Keep financial information secret. So for instance, that would be if they had a joint bank account or joint online banking, and then they didn't have access to that bank account, so they weren't able to see what was coming in and going out of that account. And then we've got exploit economic situations. So steal money, steal or damage property. So it could be a joint property that they own, but they could just damage it, or, you know, refuse to leave the property after the split has taken place, refuse to pay the bills or spend the bill money on other things. So, you know, that's one thing that I do see quite a lot in survivors' stories, is, you know, them refusing to pay the bills and then racking up debt. And then that goes into the next one, which putting debt in the person's name. So taking out different loans, credit cards without the individual knowing. So then they rack that debt up. So then after they have left, then they're in debt, and then they have to build that credit scoring again. So what I'd like to say is economic abuse is past, present, and the future. So it's in the past where we've been in the relationship, it's in the present after we leave, and in the future because we have to rebuild that credit scoring. So I've got some statistics up here that I thought were very powerful. So 8.7 million people have reported experiencing economic abuse. So that's a lot of people. 2 out of 5 adults in 2020 experienced economic abuse. So that's in the whole of the UK. 1 in 8 adults experience economic abuse in their lifetime. 10% of those who have experienced abuse, which is nearly 1 million people, say that abuse is currently ongoing. Abuse can cause severe and long-term debt and poor credit ratings, which can negatively impact the victim for decades, something that I definitely advocate against. And approximately 2.3 million UK adults experienced domestic abuse in the year end of March 2020. So that was 1.6 million women and 757,000 men, which is a really big number. And I believe since the pandemic has happened, that is completely shot up. And we're just waiting for some more statistics on that. So the reason why economic abuse is something I'm very passionate about, it's something I advocate towards, is due to my own personal story. So, which I'm going to share with you today. So when I was 17 years old, I got into a relationship. I was in a relationship for 7.5 years, so quite a long period of time. I didn't realise that abuse was taking place till after I'd left, because at the time, naively, domestic abuse wasn't spoken about really from where I was from, not in my workplace. And then when I had Googled domestic abuse, it just mainly come up as the myth of physical abuse. And I thought, I haven't been through physical abuse throughout my whole sort of relationship, so I didn't realise the red flags and the signs. So at 22 years old, I bought my first mortgage property. It was something that I thought was my sort of main goal in life, which has completely changed, which I'll get into in a minute. So I got this with a joint individual, because where I'm from, and well, for anybody, it's quite difficult to get a mortgage on your own. I was extremely happy when I got this property. It was my dream. It was a nice 2-bed flat. I loved it. I took much pride in it. I did it all up, gutted the whole thing out, did all the redecorating. I absolutely loved it. Family paid towards a lot of different things within the property, which I was really grateful for. So I was in the relationship, and there was times in the relationship where it was very difficult, and I thought it was just a normal relationship. So for instance, a lot of arguing, a lot of sort of emotional abuse. So as I say, when domestic abuse takes place, lots of different abuses normally create that. One of the things that this individual did do, which I didn't realise was a problem, was take advantage of my financial independence. So when we was in the relationship, I've been in banking for 6.5 years. Before that, I used to work in care with the elderly, with dementia patients. So I've always been in employment. I work extremely hard. I always have done. And yeah, so I was financially independent. He lost his job quite a lot, so I would, make sure I'd pay his rent, or different things like that. And I thought that's normal in a relationship, you're just helping out your partner. But when we got this mortgage property, I decided to get a joint bank account with him. I thought it was reasonable to do so the mortgage and the bills come out, because I actually didn't trust that he'd be able to pay, or he'd pay it. So we got a joint mortgage, joint bank account. And he started taking money out of the joint bank account, so cash withdrawals every week of like £200 to £250. And I'd say, like, why are you doing that? Obviously, when he did have a job, I was obviously earning more money, so I was like, you're taking my money as well. He did have a drug habit, so that's what he was doing that for. And if I'd question it, it'd cause an argument, and he'd say, you know, will you spend £10 on a bottle of wine down the pub each week so I'm allowed to take what I want, sort of thing. So it was really difficult. And when we did have the mortgage, I was working in banking. I was trying to do as much overtime as possible to make sure that, you know, we could pay for all of this and still live quite comfortably. So at the age of 24, so in 2019, I decided that the relationship wasn't for me anymore. I don't think I was very happy for a very long period of time, but I didn't realise, you know, one of my main sort of goals in life was, you know, I wanted to meet somebody young, be with them forever, you know, fairy tale, be with them forever, have a house, get married, have kids. But obviously this just wasn't going to work. So, yeah, and I was a bit fed up of doing everything in the house and everything like that. So I ended the relationship in June 2019. It was amicable, which I was surprised at, but it was amicable at the start. You know, we continued to live together till August 2019. It was 2 beds, he had a separate room. But then by then it was kind of getting a bit like emotionally, sort of verbally abusive. You know, I'd get home from work and he'd expect me to clean up after him still. And, you know, he was like, he was checking up on me, and I felt like I was trapped, and I felt like, you know, and I was paying the mortgage and the bills. We'd split the joint bank account and he wasn't paying me the full amount. So I decided in August 2019, due to my mental health, I suffer with anxiety. I decided to move in with my parents. So I did that, and I continued to pay the mortgage and the bills because I didn't, you know, well, mortgage, I'm jointly liable. So of course I was going to pay that. The bills, I didn't realise I didn't have to pay them if I wasn't living there. So I continued to pay them. And I'd go back every other weekend, get my post. I had a valuer go round. I was trying to get the property on the market, but obviously as it was joint, I had to get joint consent, which I was struggling to get. There would be excuse after excuse, but I was trying to keep it amicable because I just wanted to move on. So, you know, it got to about October 2019, and I decided enough's enough. I want to put this property on the market. I want to move on. You know, he owed me about £800. So one evening he said, do you want to come around to have a chat? Because I wanted to have a chat. We were supposed to do it was a Friday night, and we were supposed to do it on the Saturday, but you know, he decided, you know, let's do it on the Friday night. So I drove around there in my pajamas on a Friday night, and we had a chat, and I literally said, like, look, you owe me £800. We need to get this property on the market. And he snapped. And there was, you know, I stayed silent. I tried to leave the property, and then there was a physical altercation. So that's when, you know, it went into my mind. And after speaking to the police, that the domestic abuse was taking place. But again, I didn't put two to two together with the finances side of thing. So yeah, so there was physical abuse, got a non-molestation order, which he breached, and then a restraining order. And then in January of 2020, I hired a solicitor, and the solicitor told me I didn't have to pay the bills. So I stopped paying the bills, and by this stage, obviously, he'd been arrested. He wasn't paying me anything now, so it was going up and up. And so with my solicitor's advice, I cancelled all the bills and backdated from when I left. So I got reimbursed, and I took that off of what he owed me, and it still wasn't enough. So then till about September 2020, my solicitor wrote, and we tried everything to get him to sell this property. So, you know, I even offered at a last resort that I'd do all the selling. He'd just have to sign the paper, and I would not, he could have all the equity, if any, and I'd walk away with nothing just because I wanted to move on. But yeah, he still wasn't playing ball. So there was the control element there. So then I had a difficult decision. It was either to stop paying and let it go in repossession, or to take it to court. I'd been advised that it was going to cost around £15,000 minimum to take it to court, just to get a full sale, where they just, you know, sign to say that I can sell it without his permission. But if he didn't want, they could dispute it, and it would cost me more money. Working in banking, very difficult for me. I have to have a good credit score into work in banking. So, you know, I had to weigh it out. But in the end, I decided to stop paying my mortgage. So I did in September 2020. We did it all officially. We wrote to the bank. The bank were aware of the situation. You know, everybody knew. Stop paying. And then this is where the story, you know, you'd hope that it was like, oh, this will be finished now, but unfortunately not. So the bank, when I first missed the payment, even though they had all the notes on the system, they started calling me every other day, asking me why I wasn't paying my mortgage. It was a very difficult time for me. By this stage, I had agoraphobia, OCD, anxiety, and depression. And I was very tearful every time I had to speak to them. At one instance, I'd ask, can they just please read the notes? But they said to me, no, we want to hear it from you while you're not paying. And it took them about 2 months till, say, the end of December 2020 until they actually moved my case over to a vulnerability team, so a specialised team. You know, and there was lots of different problems with the bank and different things like that. And then I'd looked after by the vulnerability team. They put my notes on the system, put a flag on my account. I had to give evidence that I'd experienced domestic abuse, which was fine. I have no problem with that. So, you know, I got a GP's letter, I had a solicitor's letter, I had the restraining order, court paperwork. I had, you know, everything. I had a support worker at this time. They wrote a letter for me as well. And then obviously I was just waiting for this repossession, and I kept ringing up every week saying, you know, I still really want this to go through. And they were like, yeah, it's being done, it's being done. And then by about February of 2021, I rang up and this lady answered and said, no, it's on hold. It's been on hold because of the COVID pandemic. And that really crushed me, because every single month they were adding fees on to my mortgage for missed payments, and my credit rating was going down. So, you know, I made the complaint. They didn't do much. They compensated me £70. Not that was, I weren't there to try and get any compensation of that sort. And so I had to let it sort of take its like course. So in the end, I was like, this is ridiculous. I don't want anybody else to go through this. And I can't believe, you know, I felt like I was the only person. So I come up with the idea of a fairer financial future for sufferers and survivors of domestic abuse. So that was in March 2021. In February 2021, I approached my workplace and asked if they had a domestic abuse policy. They said by law they didn't need one, so they weren't going to provide me one or put one in place. But I was like, well, they will. So I come up with this idea, and it was made up of 4 points. So there was 1, which was raising awareness, 2, implementing training, 3, enhancing policies and procedures, and 4, obtaining lending opportunities for those with bad credit due to no fault of their own. So I weren't sure where this idea was going to go and what I was going to do. I had severe anxiety. I couldn't even leave the front door, but I was like, we're going to try and make this work. And as I'd come up with this idea, there was an advertisement for a competition called Young Banker of the Year Worldwide, hosted by the Chartered Banker Institute, which the bank that I work for is part of. So I thought, why not? So I reached out to someone in my workplace who is the mentor, and I said, you don't know me, I've experienced domestic abuse, this is my idea. And at first she was a bit like, oh my God, what are we doing? But she was like, no, she was straight in and she was like, let's do this. So put in my first submission. I don't have any university degree. I don't know any bank jargon. I've never been in for a competition. But so I was had very limiting beliefs about myself, but we put it in. I didn't think it would go anywhere. And then I got a phone call to say that I was through to the quarterfinals. So I got through to the quarterfinals, had an interview, did that. And I was like, I don't think I'm going to get anywhere else with this, because quite a lot of other people's ideas, they all had university degrees, they were graduates, all different sort of green lending, bank jargony sort of ideas. Mine was domestic abuse, and nobody even really spoke about it in banking. And then I got through to the semi-finals, and then that's when my LinkedIn sort of went viral. I posted a post on domestic abuse and my story, and it hit around 125,000 views. And I was like, wow, this is a thing. And people wanted to help. Charities were reaching out to me, different banks, different survivors, and it was really, really great. And it was a great feeling. So when I was doing the semi-final, my bank approached me, the one that I work for, and said, are you sure you want to go ahead? Because, you know, this will go viral in the papers, and if your ex-partner sees it, it may put you in a difficult situation. And I said, no, I want to go ahead. And they asked me about 5 times, and I was like, I want to go ahead. This is my decision. I'm taking my control back. So that's what I did. I went ahead and I got through to the finals. I was the first UK female to get through to the worldwide finals. I was the only female in the finals. And yeah, so I did that final. It was in October of 2021. And I'd spoken to, by this stage, the FCA, Home Office, HM Treasury, UK Finance. Some of these are like sort of bank regulatory people. I'd started putting my idea into place. So I'd started raising awareness throughout the whole of the bank. I started implementing training, getting partnerships with Surviving Economic Abuse that do bespoke training for banks. I brought out a domestic abuse policy. It was the first one in Ireland, because I work for an Irish bank, and it's across the group, so within the UK and the US. And it was an amazing experience to be able to put a policy, and I turned a policy around within 3 months. Policies seem to take about 3 years sometimes in banking. And yeah, so I did all that. I did the final and I won the competition, and I held the worldwide title, the first UK female to do so. So I turned my negative story into a positive one, and I continued to fight. So I've also been shortlisted for Banking and Finance Businesswoman of the Year 2022 due to the work that I do. I still continue to do all my work. I do podcasts, newspaper articles, blogs. I've been reached out to by TV people. Yeah, I do lots of work. I work with all different banks as well. I come in, I share my story, I help them put policies and procedures into place. I sit on different boards. My story's been shared throughout the Home Office to bring change on economic abuse. And yes, yeah, so I do all this charity work as well. But the main idea for me was to provide the lending opportunities for those with poor credit. And I didn't know how I was going to do it because they're very strict when it comes to credit scoring. But, you know, I started working with different partners, sort of fell the idea together. And now what we're doing in banking is we're providing lending to those with poor credit due to no fault of their own. It's something it's going to be piloted by the end of the year in the bank that I work for existing customers and staff. I'm working with other high street banks that will be able to who want to put the same thing in for their customers. So it's something that will gradually be rolled out. It's normal APR rates, it's normal loan rates, and we just bypass the credit scoring if you have the income and expenditure to do so. It's something I'm really proud of. You know, it's being done on personal loans, but we're looking at, you know, once the pilot is successful, and I'm 100% guaranteed it will be, that we can do it for credit cards, overdrafts, and one day, hopefully, a mortgage. I can get another one. So that's all the work that I do and what's come out of my bad experience. But to go back to my bad experience is that, you know, the mortgage company, so the high street bank my mortgage was with, not the bank that I work for. And yeah, I had to wait for my repossession. So I'd been waiting since September 2020, and finally in June 2022, they repossessed the property. Very happy moment for me after they put fees on of about £650 per month, and my credit rating goes down per month for them near enough 2 years. And now it's still waiting to be sold, but they have advised me that due to the bad treatment that they have given me, that they're going to write my debt off. And that's very unheard of in the mortgage front, to write off a debt so large. Not going to hold my breath because, you know, they've said things that they haven't really kept to. But yeah, so I will soon be free of that, which I'm very excited. It's a very long process. I have had some harassment along the way from my ex-partner and his family, commenting on my social medias and all my talks and podcasts and saying all the different things under the sun. But I continue to fight for what I believe in. I will not let anybody else stop me. So that's my story. And I just wanted to finish off as I go about the bank. So obviously I work in banking, that's something that I specialise in, and financial abuse. So for people that are experiencing economic and financial abuse, this is very important, and this is what I tell all survivors that I speak to give them a bit of background. So in 2021, UK Finance, which is where all the banks sit on, brought out the fact that they was going to do a financial abuse code of practice. So the financial abuse code of practice would be, something that wasn't mandatory but was signed up to by other banks. So that's what certain banks did, and you'll see the participating firms down the side there. I work for AIB, so that's the main bank there, but you'll see a lot of high street banks that do that. So we pledged that by the end of 2022, and we are continuing doing it into 2023 and forevermore, hopefully, that we pledge to do more for our customers that experience economic abuse. As you heard from my story, I've had some poor experiences. That's not the full story, and there's worse. And, I've heard so many different stories. It's so important that we do this for our customers. So UK Finance, as well as ourselves, have worked with multiple charities, the HM Treasury, Home Office, and great organisations to make sure that we do best practice for our customers. So we have a monthly working group. I sit on that, which I thoroughly enjoy. And there's different things in the code, and we're bringing out a lot more things in the next year. So I'll obviously update people as it happens. But things in the code include raising awareness and encouraging disclosures. Because one, people don't think to go to their bank with that information. I only knew to do that because I worked in banking, but a lot of people don't think about going to their bank. And a lot of people don't trust their bank either. And that could be from poor experiences or other factors. Training of colleagues. So, like what I do is like raise awareness to, I've done that to some of the high street banks that are participating there, shared my story to the whole of the bank, to raise that awareness. I encourage them to partner with surviving economic abuse and get bespoke training. And that's what we've been doing in our bank. Identification and appropriate responses. So when we identify it, respond appropriately rather than just ignoring it, or not, when you put the notes on the system, ignoring them, which I know that they have done many a times. Minimising the need to repeat one story. As I said, with my experience, I found it very traumatic, and I shouldn't have had to repeat that story, and no one should have to repeat that story. Once you've told that story, that should be it. You shouldn't have to say it again. Help to regain control finances. So for instance, if some people have joint bank accounts like I did, and they don't have their own bank account. So then when the abuse takes place, they're unable to have their own finances, so we can help regain that control. And signpost and referrals to charities. This is only a small amount that we've started doing, and we've been doing it for the whole year. But it's something very important, and we have to start off small, because we need to make sure the awareness is there, the training's there, and we put in policies and procedures so we can actually help our customers rather than a tick box exercise. So what I'd always say, and what I've said to different survivors, that, take a look at the financial abuse code, because it's more in detail on UK Finance's website. And if one of the participating firms is your bank and you've been treated poorly, then you can reach out and say, well, you're part of the financial abuse code. And what banks can do to help. So I always say to people that speak to your bank if you are experiencing economic abuse. They are there to support you. Depending on your bank, this can be done in a safe space in branches. So we've seen recently that TSB have safe spaces, HSBC also do, over the phone or via a web chat. Some banks do have web chats as well. If you're not satisfied with the way that you've been treated, make a complaint. I'm not one to always make a complaint, but I had to make numerous complaints to the high street bank that holds my mortgage. And the reason I do that is not for any compensation. It's so that they can actually educate themselves and train their staff and learn from them. Because when we do get complaints in, especially if they go higher up, we do make sure that we do lessons learned and we do train our staff and make sure that it doesn't happen again. So banks may be able to help with transferring you to a specialised vulnerability team. Not all banks have specialised vulnerability teams, but some of them do. Placing a support flag on your account. So a support flag, they have to ask your consent. So when you share your story, they'll ask you if you want a support flag on your account. I'd always say yes. So that means every time you ring up the bank or do any communication with your bank and they get your account up, the flag will flag, and it will say, briefly what's been going on. So that means that they shouldn't ask you again to repeat your story. That's all strictly private and confidential. Nobody else will see it. Not even a joint party on the account would know anything about that either. Signposting, so signposting to some amazing charities, which is really important. How to delink your finances from the abuser. So if you have a joint bank account, how to split that joint bank account, for instance. Remove you from the joint bank account. Send your post to an alternative address. So if there is some people that are now living elsewhere, can't access the property, like I couldn't. Also if they're in refuge, then you'll be able to get your post sent there. Help you open a bank account. So we do, in the bank that I work for, we do a specialised account now. So we can open a bank account without the need for identification and proof of address. So it's something I come up with in September 2021. It was something that my bank that I work for are extremely supportive. So what we do is we just ask for, say, a GP letter, which is free of charge as per the Domestic Abuse Act, or a solicitor's letter, whatever sort of letter. And then other banks have now followed suit with that. And that's so people like myself that couldn't access a property that had their documentations in it, so they're not like penalised for that. Control who has access to your accounts, so making sure that there's no third party on the account that you don't want there to be. Give you information on loans and accounts. So for instance, as I always say to people, when you have experienced this, ring up your bank, see if there is any loans or accounts that you're unaware of. And that's something you can also do through a credit search scoring. So through partners such as ClearScore, which is free of charge, and you can sign up to that and keep an eye on your credit scoring. And that will show you what loans and accounts you have. So if you don't recognise some, then you can reach out. And managing debts. So obviously there's a very long way that we have to do with managing debts, but they can help you if you disclose domestic abuse, how that can be managed. They can put it on holiday payments. As I say, all banks are different, but holiday payments, and in some cases, like myself, and I've heard it with other high street banks, with personal loans, credit cards, that they'll wipe the debt. So that is my story. That's everything I do. I'm extremely passionate about what I do. I love what I do, and I will continue to do what I do until people like myself can rebuild their lives and live a lovely life after going through such a horrific event. So thank you for listening.
Wow, Rosie, you are remarkable. Absolutely remarkable. Thank you so much for that. I knew it'd be amazing tonight. I just knew it. And it's a big deal sharing stuff. What you've achieved is remarkable. Absolutely remarkable. I've got a few questions. Well, I'm going to selfishly jump in myself, really. With a question I've got is, do you speak to, or do many lawyers express an interest regarding the Financial Abuse Code? And do you get chance to speak to many family lawyers to say, this is what people in difficulty can ask their banks to do?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So with the work that I've been doing and with other banks with UK Finance, there's no sort of solicitors apart from the ones that work within our banks. So obviously we have solicitors like a legal team. So they'd be made aware of it. But I haven't had any other sort of solicitors that reach out to me for any sort of it, apart from yourselves, of course. But to be fair, I haven't seen any sort of solicitors that actually specialise or take full interest in domestic economic abuse, as I say, apart from yourselves, which is why I always recommend to go to yourselves, because you want someone that can understand that. But it would be great if they actively got involved and wanted to learn more, because I do feel that some survivors, when they hire a solicitor, they don't get the treatment that they need or the understanding and maybe get some poor decisions made from what I've heard and experienced myself.
Yes, absolutely. There's a massive disconnect, isn't there? It's the
Yeah.
lawyers who are often giving the practical and the legal advice. And a lot of this obviously isn't legal advice, but the lawyers aren't signposting, essentially.
Yeah.
So I think we need to reduce that disconnect and fix that specifically. I will be sharing this with my team anyway. And I believe Kate's probably going to be sharing it across the firm now anyway. It's absolutely remarkable. Some of those statistics that you were talking about were just amazing. And the length of time that it's taken you to get your house sorted, get your flat sorted is nuts, isn't it?
I know, and it mentally impacts you through that time, because it's in the back of, it's always been in the back of my head, because I've just pushed it to the back, and just because there was nothing else I could do, I've tried my hardest, been in contact with him every single week since it first happened. I've been told, well, you're joint liable, so you have to pay. I've been told, lots of different things and lots of different promises that weren't kept. And a repossession, it should not take that long when someone has actively told you that they want that property repossessed, because that's the only way for them to be clear and move on. But they're still, because they go through a certain sort of procedure, which I don't know heads and tails of, because I don't work in the sort of lending part, that they have to follow this suit, and they send you letters, and you have to default a certain amount of times, which I had done. But then they also they ring you up, and I got a phone call. It was about to be repossessed at the end of June, and I was in Spain in mid-June celebrating. I got a phone call from an unknown number, and I knew who it was going to be. It was going to be the High Street Bank, and they said, "Oh, you do know your property's being repossessed?" And I was like, "Yes," because my account was now being looked after by a different department. And he was like, "Well, you're going to pay it off so you can get your property back." After I've shared my story for that how many years, safe to say there was a complaint made in the airport on the way on the way home. But no, it's been very testing time.
Wow, it's amazing you're talking to us with a smile on your face. It really is. It's amazing. Right, do you mind if we just do a few questions? Is that okay with you, Rosie?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Okay, cool. I've got one very practical question here, which you're going to be able to answer, I think, more than me. When with something called Section 42 safeguarding inquiries are made, so when inquiries are made to a bank, but they're not responding to the person who's asking for those inquiries, so for example a social worker, is there anything that a social worker can do in terms of trying to get to speak to the right department?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question, actually. I don't deal with that personally myself, because I'm still an EA at the moment, but I would say that it is very difficult, and it depends on the bank as well. But I would say to keep ringing up, and that's the only thing really. And I know it's really horrible to say, because some of these call centres, you're on hold for hours and hours and hours, but it's, for me and other things, constantly just chase, and if it happens, and they put a complaint in as well, because they should be answering that. They should be taking that as a priority, and if they're not, then they're failing on what they're supposed to do.
Okay. Don't get me started on call centres. That is just exhausting. You've probably got PTSD from it.
It's ridiculous.
I've got a question here, just to you regarding the code. Do you hope to implement the code that you've created into law, so we can make it compulsory for all banks to follow it and be legally sanctioned if they don't follow it?
Yeah, no, definitely. I've always, with my ideas, I've always said that I want it to be compulsory, mandatory, because it shouldn't have to be. It shouldn't be, just if you've got the time to do it, or if you want to do it. It should be, well, this is actually real life, and this affects so many people. So yeah, the things that I work for, and that's why I do so many advocating, and I connect with so many people on LinkedIn through the banking and through different, and speak to the Home Office and relevant people to try and get people to actually listen. And I think Surviving Economic Abuse as well, they do amazing work with getting people to listen as well. But it's something that I will not stop until it is mandatory, until it's consistent across all banks. And even if it needs to be, I'd love it to be worldwide. So people like myself do not have to go through only the small, I'd say the small part, because I know people go through a lot worse than what I did, of having to suffer for them many years to, you know, not even be able to rebuild their life. Like I say, like I've got poor credit score and I can't even get a phone contract out in my name. What are people, you know, how are people going to survive if they don't have family or friends to rely on, if they don't have them finances, you know, if they don't qualify to get into refuge, then where are they? How are they going to rebuild their life? And that's why I'm so passionate about what I do.
Yes, it's just it's absolutely mind-boggling. It really is. Got a couple of questions on the same theme here. I'll roll it into one. Just really when we're looking at what is and what isn't economic abuse. So in your view, Rosie, would you say it's economic abuse if you decide to open your own bank account and the other person tells you to, so your partner tells you to shut it down because you're putting your own salary into your own bank account, and then perhaps obviously either sanction you, punish you some way if you don't shut it down and go back to transparency for finances? I'd say that definitely.
Yeah, no, that definitely is, and it's a form of coercive control, which is another subcategory. And we was talking about this the other day in work, and you know, all these different types of abuses, and you think it's it's massive the amount, but you know, that could fall under multiple types of abuse there. Controlling, you know, technology abuse, obviously economic, financial abuse as well, and that's why we all call it domestic abuse, and they're the subcategories, because it's not just one instance. But yeah, I'd 100% say that, because that individual should be able to have their own bank account and choose wherever they want to put their own salary into. No one should be allowed to control that or should have any say in that whatsoever.
Yes, I agree. And the same goes for a joint bank account. You know, it is abuse if you're being quizzed or instructed as to what you can spend or can't spend from that joint account. Sometimes the abuser thinks the idea that there is a joint account in place means that everything's free and easy and easily, and their conduct is perhaps easily defensible or something, defended and whatever. But it does
definitely.
Abuse, absolutely.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. And joint bank accounts are the main thing. And I'd always say now I'd never get another joint bank account. Even though I've moved on, I have a lovely relationship now. I'd never get a joint bank account with him, not because I don't trust him, but I've been through that experience, and I've heard so many survivors' stories, and you know, and we see it as well where they rack debt up, overdrafts, and then it gets stuck with the other person because they refuse to pay, or you know, they start taking money out of the bank account, as I said in my story, or they start quizzing everything that you do and why are you spending this and that, but then they're allowed to do it. So yeah, 100%.
There's a question here regarding as to whether or not there are any criminal or civil punishments that you're aware of that are implemented when we have economic abuse, essentially.
Yeah, no, I don't think so personally at all. No, I think there is on like sort of coercive control now, and different elements of that, but again, it's nothing that would sort of I'd say some people definitely would wish they were. You know, I went through different elements with police, for instance, and nothing got done with mine. I'm not saying it wouldn't for anybody else. You know, I've also had experiences with elderly individuals when I worked in care, going through financial abuse, and you know, again, there wasn't much done. Again, I think a lot more needs to be done, and I think it is one of them abuses that not easily spotted, or what they'd say is not easily spotted. And it's the myth again that domestic abuse is just physical, and unless you've got that physical sort of abuse or that the scarring, then I feel like not much gets done.
I agree. The awareness is it's increasing, but it's very slow.
Very slow.
New legislation that's come in as I've said before, I think on here, it's a great thing that we've got new legislation. Brilliant. We're never going to poo-poo it because we need more legislation. There are a few that would think that it falls short of the mark, and yes, it does. But we still have to be pleased that we've got it, because it is better than not having it, obviously. The difficulty in family law, in normal everyday cases, is frequently with financial abuse. It means that the money's spent and gone for good. So the opportunity to compensate somebody, for example, within a divorce settlement or what have you, there's no money there to give back. In the work I do, it's very hard to establish something called an add back. So if somebody has willingly spent a lot of money, dissipated assets of a marriage, it's very hard to persuade a district judge to add that money back in. So a fair outcome can be achieved. And as lawyers, we do spend a lot of time explaining the law, but also dealing with its limitations. I think when you're going through the law, it's quite easy to become quite you have your eyes opened as to the how vulnerable you can be, and how insufficiently you're protected. It's a real shame. We assume that because the English legal system is one of the best in the world, it's emulated by other countries. They seek to reproduce what we've got, but when you're going through it, it doesn't feel like a first-class legal system at all. It can feel unjust. It's probably the best way to put it. That's after the delays. If you think a bank call centre's bad, try the court service. And it's not their it's really not their fault. And there are some absolutely wonderful people who work for the court service who go over and above, left, right, and centre for us as lawyers, and litigants in person. And it's just a sad situation that we're in at the moment. But if we just circle back to what happens when somebody is in an abusive relationship, I think from the financial perspective, the first pressure here is to get out as quickly as possible. You need to put a marker down for the end of the relationship. Really hard to leave, though.
It is extremely hard to leave. And as I say, it takes someone on average 7 times. When I left, I did leave. That was it. I didn't go back or anything like that. But the reason, but it was torture, because you had the post-separation abuse, another form of abuse, post-separation, which is the after part. And they say that when you do leave, even if you haven't experienced physical abuse, that within the 3 months after you've left, then that's most likely to happen, and to be careful. And that's what did happen with me. So, if you want to leave a relationship, or you don't know how to, always say to reach out. There's charities there that will be able to help. There's obviously coaches, or I'm happy to speak to anybody that needs advice as well. Don't mind doing that. On making a safety plan and making it safe so that you're able to leave safely. Because it is tricky. I just obviously left, but then it caused I didn't have a plan in place, and I wish I was educated more on it, or understood it more, so I could have that plan in place.
And you had support of your family, and you've lived with them, obviously. That not everybody has that. It's you were so lucky. There is I was doing a little bit of research earlier today, and one of the first things that people do if they don't have the support to hand with family is actually work out what money you're eligible for. Can you get any immediate support? Essentially, it's where to get cash in an emergency, isn't it? There is I think it's one of the government websites. It's moneyhelper.org. Do you know this? moneyhelper.org.uk. But they do have a list of links. It's always links to something, isn't it? Of where to get cash in an emergency. But it goes through England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland to just put you in touch with where to see if you can get that extra financial support. Yes, lawyers can talk to you about how to fund cases in due course if we're dealing with the end of a marriage, But first and foremost, you need money to feed yourself and put a roof over your head, don't you?
Yeah.
And some instances that might be a refuge. And if it is, go. They're wonderful things, run by wonderful people.
Yeah, they definitely are. If you qualify for it, I've never had to go into one, but then I was learning about them, and it was like there was a criteria that if you was like in life or death danger, and obviously I wouldn't have been qualified as that. So I do think, like, you know, what if people haven't got the family, if they haven't got the friends to rely on or anything like that? But it is definite to reach out to charities, because they will help you. The government will, like your local council, they will help, and obviously other people will definitely help along the way as well.
If you can, take your ID documents with you. If you take nothing else from a house, take your ID, because that'll get things done a bit quicker. There is one of the websites I looked at earlier that had a fabulous kind of whimsical wish list as to what else you should take with you in terms of, you know, remember to take your insurance policy documents with you and your credit card things. In a really abusive situation, that probably would not be at the forefront of my mind at all. But yes, your ID documents, if possible. I think most of us have our driving licenses in purses or whatever, or some form of ID. Keep it on hand, keep it on you all the time. Or if you can't do that, somehow try and get a photocopy of it and keep a photocopy of it elsewhere at a safe place. I knew someone who used to keep legal documents under the spare wheel of their car, so they weren't found. Things are easier now, most of it's digital, but then again, we haven't really touched on tech abuse, have we?
Yeah.
But that's massively on the rise, and it may well be, if you're willing to come back, Rosie, maybe next year we can pick up on the tech abuse side of things.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely, because there's a lot that we do in banks as well about tech abuse and stuff like that as well. So yeah, no, definitely.
Cool, that'd be great. Yeah, we've got lots of surveillance stuff going on at the moment and tracking devices. It's a whole different world out there at the moment from when I first started working in this area. Just going to have a quick check for any more questions. You guys are absolutely a sterling crowd tonight. Do you know what? There's a huge amount of love for you, Rosie, in the chat box. It's great. Honestly, we've got some real troopers tonight. It's brilliant to see everybody out and about, letting us know what they think. Okay, right, let's have a look. Fraud, that's a hard one. That does pop up quite a bit, doesn't it? They take loans out in the name of the spouse, to deliberately damage credit ratings, overdraw accounts. Oh crikey, yeah. Perpetrators who work in financial services, so know their way around. That's very dangerous, isn't it?
That is.
Oh dear, okay. Do you think more awareness needs to be made about the current law, and how do you think this should be done given how sensitive the issue is? I think we just shouted from the rooftops.
Definitely, yeah, I agree with that. Everything I always say is, like, you just have to shout it as loud as possible.
And this might be impossible for you to talk about, really, and I know you don't have your own stats on this, but we talked a lot about male abuse in the past on this webinar, and can I assume most of the people who contact you for support are female? Is that right, Rosie?
Yeah, you can assume that. It is a majority of people that do reach out to me and they want a chat about financial and economic abuse is generally females, but I do know quite a few men that have experienced it as well, that have reached out to me all through LinkedIn, mainly as my main channel. They see my posts and they feel that they can open up to me, which is really lovely, and I really love to be able to help people where I can. But yeah, it is mainly women, but as I say, there is a lot of men as well that I have spoken to that have experienced it. Yeah,
and we know from statistics we've seen before, men are much more they're not supported as well as female victims are. There isn't the support service. A couple of questions on the Q&A that we've got tonight, where people looks to be in litigation at the moment. There is a great support out there. Tom Nash, you might know him. Mr. Divorce Coach. He is very good when it comes to providing support for male victims, and obviously we can signpost you as well, but it doesn't feel that there is equal or sufficient resources available. I think that's going to change. I'm confident that's going to change over time.
Yeah, no, definitely. There is some wonderful charities out there that help men, but it isn't the same as what other genders and females get. So yeah, no, I completely agree. And everything I do it for all genders. It doesn't matter age, whoever. I do it for everybody. I don't discriminate against.
Okay, cool. Well, Rosie, we're now we're after 6:30. I'm sorry, I think I might
Okay.
Need your evening to get to. Thank you very much for giving up your time. And I need to tell everybody that this isn't Rosie the only thing she does with her time. She has a full-time job as well, so it's remarkable she does this. But thank you very much for giving up your time to share your experience with us. This is the one I've been looking forward to for a long time this year. It's been a long time in the making. But also the one that's going to stick with me. I've got information that I want to share with my team. I think we do need to sort out that disconnect with lawyers. We need to have the lawyers better equipped to answer these kind of questions as to what happens to this, what happens with that, what should I tell the bank? The bank's calling me all the time. We can do our bit. So let's make sure we can change that and improve things. Now, I think there's lots of commentary again in the chat. God, you guys are awesome tonight.
Yeah, I know. Thank you, everybody. It's so lovely.
Kate's going to do a follow-up email. Our next Stowe Talks is going to be, the one that's definitely scheduled is the 23rd of February. So we don't have one in December. The one in February is called Accessing Support Through the Court. We have a great charity that we work with called Support Through the Court Charity. And we've got special guests, Georgina and Susan, who are going to talk about what happens when you go to court. And that's what happens when you go to court primarily on your own. It's a big deal. It's scary. So if anybody has that kind of coming up, then obviously end of February is a good session to listen to. Now, I think in what am I going to say? I think in January we might be looking at doing one regarding the cost of living crisis and budgeting and what happens when we are stuck, I think, and relationships break down. Whilst I wish everybody a great time for the festive period that's coming up, it's a difficult time. Reach out obviously with support links that we're going to be putting in the follow-up email. Reach out to us as lawyers. We're here if anybody has any family law queries that are worrying you, any finance queries. Rosie's here. You're going to have her contact details. And let's go onwards and upwards into 2023 when we get a chance. But Rosie, I've really enjoyed tonight. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. I look forward to seeing you again soon. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.